In the eyes of the British, the Indians are cattle. This English woman loved to hear this little Indian girl sing, so she brought the girl to her husband, Charles. She asked Charles to buy the little lark. Charles told his men to pay for it. It throws the girl's parents turquoise. The noblewoman turned around and left with the girl. In their eyes, the money was already paid for, but the girl's mother didn't want to sell her daughter. She jumped in front of the car and begged. The British soldiers rushed forward to shoot her. Charles immediately intervened. I thought the old man was a good man. I didn't realize he thought bullets were too expensive. He didn't think the girl's mother was worth a bullet. The soldier understood. He put away his gun and picked up a stick. He hit the girl's mother on the head. The Indians were all stunned. The girl was taken away, but what the British didn't know was that the girl's brother was a very powerful man. Since he was a child, he's always gone into the woods. The wolves, tigers, and leopards were his playmates. David learned of his sister's capture. He wanted his friends to help him save his sister. When the tiger didn't listen, he beat him up. At that moment, the English were partying in the castle. Unbeknownst to them, David and his friends were on their way. A big truck crashed through the castle gates. The English soldiers were so scared. They scattered. The truck was full of David's friends. David descended like the leader of the beasts. The English soldiers were so frightened, they almost wet their pants. Even the noble women were dumbfounded. The beasts began to slaughter the soldiers. It was chaos. David, while dealing with the soldiers, while his search for his sister, when the girl saw David, she tried to run away, but a big fat man grabbed her by the hair. David also saw his sister. The big fat man threw his sister into the room. Then he closed the door. He locked the door discreetly. The key was stuck in his wrist guard. Then he rushed to fight with David, but he was no match for David. Seeing that he had the key in his hand, David could not let him go. He took the chain and beat the fat man. After getting the key, he was about to save his sister. There was a voice in the distance. It turned out to be his best buddy, John, but John had become a lackey of the British. The oil drums on the train accidentally derailed and crashed into the river. The boy in the river was overturned. Along with his pie, the boy was surrounded by fire. It was then that David and John, meeting for the first time, looked at each other from a distance. David got on his motorcycle and rode up to the bridge. John gave him a few hand signals from afar. They were like two friends who had known each other for a long time. They had a very good understanding. Saved lives in an incredible way, and they became good friends. But now, David came alone to save his sister. John has become a lapdog of the British. He persuaded David not to resist. David didn't listen. He started fighting David, and he did it without mercy. David couldn't believe that his brother had turned against him, but the pain in his body reminded him over and over again. He had to save his sister, so he had to start fighting back. He knew exactly what John was capable of. He didn't want to waste time fighting him, so he lured his friends to entangle him. He sneaked up to the castle himself, but John was quick to catch up with him, and he overpowered David, and he couldn't bear to hurt David. He couldn't bear to hurt David's life, but he let David be captured by the English. John was rewarded for his service. He was assigned to guard the armory to show his loyalty to the British. David was sent to the stake. On this day, John applied for a special escort, but on the way to the gallows, John mutinied again. He knocked over a tree on the side of the road, and the tree fell, knocked Max's car off the road. It was as if Max was in the form of Superman. He grabbed his gun and aimed it at John. The toy car was knocked over. The girl was thrown out. John was not spared. He crashed into a protruding tree branch, but we have to trust John's physique. He still got it easy with a shrimp. David also took out a razor blade from somewhere. He cut the ropes while he was at it, and then he took out all the soldiers in the execution chamber. The soldiers tried to shoot. Then he realized that John had tampered with his gun. The sister finally found a chance to run to David. One of the soldiers repaired the gun and reloaded the gun, aimed at the girl running towards him. From John's point of view, he could see it. The soldier immediately pulled out his gun and tried to shoot. David thought he was going to shoot himself while John was shooting the soldier. David knocked John out with a stick. David fled back to the village with his sister. Only then did he realize that they had misunderstood John. It turned out that John was going undercover. He had to find a way to take charge of the armory. Only with those weapons, they will be able to fight back. David realized that he had misunderstood his brother. He vowed to save John. He broke into the British barracks at night. John was in the dungeon. It was as as if he sensed something. He banged on the walls, and sure enough, David answered from outside. David was guided to the dungeon by John. It tipped over the iron door. The loud noise naturally alerted the British soldiers. David rushed to pull John up. I'm amazed by this maneuver. A series of amazing maneuvers that blew my mind. What kind of people come up with these moves? I have to say, the writers are really good. The two escape into the woods. The British, of course, are not going to let them go, but the forest was their territory. John was like a god. The soldiers chasing them were like shrimp in his eyes. David leapt out of the water with his spear. Throwing his spear, he knocked down a bunch of people. Facing the approaching motorcycle, he kicked it into the air. Then he grabbed the motorcycle and swung it around a few times. But it's too exhausting to keep fighting. David simply rode the motorcycle into the sky. Then he set it on fire. The motorcycle flew into the armory with sparks and ignited the explosives inside and blew up the entire barracks. After the explosion, Max was seriously injured. His wife was dead. John took care of the loose ends with an arrow. David took the opportunity to pack up the weapons. The weapon that John had been waiting for was finally in his hands. David took his gun and aimed it at Max. He shot him through the heart. The brothers returned home with a truckload of weapons. They got revenge for their family, and they got their weapon of choice.